Cornwall, Devon, Somerset and Dorset. These 4 counties leading to the southwestern tip of England host some of the most idyllic scenes in the whole of Britain. When you think about the English countryside, it doesn't get more stereotypical than this. It is basically the Shire. So, can we turn this area into a fantasy map for a Dungeons & Dragons game? Let's find out. Ahoy everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nazir North and today we are looking at the area that I've named Bretontir in our fantasy map making series for the British Isles. Last time on our map making journey we used the map making tool Wonderdraft to turn the rest of England into a land that I've called Albion, our very own fantasy take on England. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'll put the link up on screen now. But don't worry if you haven't, it doesn't really matter which order you watch these in. In this video we're going to be honing in on Bretontir, which includes the modern day English counties of Cornwall, Devon, Somerset and Dorset. Let's jump straight in. First I'm going to open up Wonderdraft and set our resolution for this project to 2048 by 1480. Next we'll import our outline and clean it up a little bit. Then let's add in the border to Albion and our external country labels. Wales across the Severn Estuary to the north is labelled as Cymru, which is Wales in Welsh. And then over to the east we have Albion, which I'd mentioned earlier. We'll get a base colour coding down, and like I've done on the previous maps, the areas we aren't going to focus on today, I'm going to leave those in their default parchment colour. While we're on colouring, I'm also going to copy over our texture and coastline styles from the previous map. Okay, let's have a think about hill and mountain placement for Bretontir. In real life, this area is relatively flat, with some rolling hills and gentle valleys. But we are designing this map for fantasy fiction, so I'm going to exaggerate some of these features for our map today. I'm going to add in some tall mountains to Dartmoor and then some rolling hills dotted elsewhere in places like Exmoor and the Quantocks. And for this in Wonderdraft I'm using the Penned Hills and the Penned Mountains assets for this. I'm also going to put a single mountain peak in at Glastonbury and we'll come back to that later on. Alright, there we go. Now on to rivers and lakes. I'm going to roughly follow the paths of some real world rivers, but I'm also going to make up some as we go along. Just adding them in here and there where it makes geographical sense and where they align to the hills and mountains that we've already placed. Alright, water done. Let's move on to trees and vegetation. For this I use the Wonderdraft assets of the hatched oak, the hatched pine and the inked tall grass. And I'm going to scale them down to about 50% of what we use for the hills and mountains. Although I have to be a little more careful on this one because this is a smaller map scale than what we've been working with so far. I need to go a little bit easy on the trees. Again, as with the water placement, I'm not going to follow exactly where forests are in real life. I'm just going to get placing. I'm just going to do it by eye. And thanks to the wonders of time-lapse, we're all finished with the vegetation. Next, my favourite part of these projects, let's get creating some fictional towns and settlements that we can add to the map, starting with what I'm going to make our capital for Bretontir. We are going to the site of Glastonbury Tor. Tor, spelled T-O-R, meaning a rocky outcropping, essentially a lone hill in an otherwise flat landscape. Now, Glastonbury Tor is almost certainly the result of natural geological processes, but for our map, let's pretend it's not. This is fantasy after all. In Celtic mythology, the Tor is believed to house the entrance to another world, the world of the Fae and fairies and of eternal youth. Sound familiar? Yeah, this is essentially the inspiration for places like Neverland from the story of Peter Pan, and for the Feywild from Dungeons & Dragons, so let's lean into it. In the ancient Bretonic language, and in modern Welsh and Cornish, this other world was called Anwyn, and gate in those languages is Porth, so I'm going to bring this into one word to get Porthanwyn, and we'll add that on as our capital. There are some stories that would place Glastonbury as the site of the mystical Avalon from Arthurian legends. However, we have already used Avalon in our map of Wales, or Cymru, in this series, so I can't use that one again. Before making some more mainland settlements, we'll give some attention to our islands, as we have a few to cover for this map. On the Isles of Scilly, the old Latin name for the islands was Silene, which is thought to mean Isles of the Sun. So I'm going to use that as is, as it's a good fantasy sounding name. Now on to the Isle of Wight. This is white spelled W-I-G-H-T, not white like the colour. Now this word white used to just mean man in Old English, but because of the Barrow Wights, as in Men of the Barrows, essentially the grave men from the Lord of the Rings, this word has become associated with things like ghosts and other undead. You can even find the Wight as a monster in the Monster Manual for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition as this undead warrior. So yeah, over time into the modern day, that word white has just become synonymous with the undead in fantasy fiction on the whole. For our place name, I'm going to take a little Latin and go with Insula Necro, which sort of means dead island, and we're going to add that one on as a settlement, so a bit like the City of the Dead. Maybe it's where the people of Bretontir send all of their exiled necromancers. Alright, moving on, way further south we have Guernsey and Jersey, both of which are Old Norse names. In Jersey, the oldest evidence of settlement is from Neanderthal remains found in a cave known as La Cotte. So I'm going to take that as the settlement name for Jersey. And for our label on Guernsey, into the Neolithic age, we have a number of dolmens and other standing stones dotted around the island. So I'm going to be super creative for this one and just take the Latin and French words for stone to get Pierlith, as there was also some Roman settlement on Guernsey as well, and it's very close to France. Alright, back to the mainland. We are going to roughly where the village of Cheddar is, the home of cheddar cheese and where Cheddar Man was discovered. The oldest complete human skeleton in Britain, over 9,000 years old. The name I'm going with is Chis Cheddar. Chis meaning, you guessed it, cheese in Old English, and Cheddar meaning a deep or dark place, which is where Cheddar gets its name from Cheddar Gorge. Yes, it's not lost on me that we've basically just named this place Cheddar Cheese. Anyway, moving on. Just north of Plymouth we have a place called Duerstone. Duer is the ancient Celtic word for the devil, and in folklore the devil rides a black horse, leading a pack of hounds across Dartmoor, chasing lost travellers in the night. I think the name Duerstone is already a really good fantasy sounding name, so I'm just going to move that down to the mouth of the river. Speaking of hounds and monsters, we have tales in this neck of the woods of the Beast of Bodmin Moor, where stories that really only took off in the 21st century tell of big cats roaming the land and killing livestock. For the place name, I'm going to go with Ferraros. Ferra meaning feral or wild in relation to animals in Latin, and Ross being another name for a moor in Cornish. Moving further west, in fact all the way to the west, we have the real world location of Land's End, which is the westernmost point of the English mainland. All we're going to do for this one is be a little bit lazy and dramatise the name a bit more and go with World's End. Still in Cornwall, along the northern coast, we have the real-world village of Zena. It's here that we can find the tale of the Mermaid of Zena, a beautiful woman with an incredible singing voice who didn't age. She eventually disappeared and was later seen swimming a mile out to sea, and was apparently a mermaid according to the stories. This one gives us two labels. I'm taking the real life village of Zena because I like the name and I'm just going to move it a little to the east. And then we also have just a regional name for the coastline that I'm going to call the Bay of Mermaids. And I think I'm actually going to leave it here for this one. I know there are plenty more names we could add in, but this is quite a small map compared to the others that we've already made in this series, and I don't want to overload it and make it too busy with too many labels. If there are, however, any obvious fantasy names that I could have included here, let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, let's tidy things up a little bit. We'll add in the border and the scale along with the windrows and compass, copying the style from our last map. And there we have it. Bretontir, my take on the southwest of England, reimagined as a fantasy map for Dungeons & Dragons or any other tabletop role-playing game you might be playing. If you want to get a hold of the map, you can find the link in the description below. I'll include both labelled and unlabelled versions if you want to use them in your own D&D campaigns. And for those of you who've been following the channel for a little while, or new viewers to this video, I finally managed to set up a membership for my channel. If you're interested, you can check out that join button underneath the video where you can see the various perks you can unlock, including these exclusive emojis and badges. So if you're interested, check it out. I hope you've all enjoyed this one. I know it was a little shorter than the last map videos, but we are working with a smaller area. If you've enjoyed, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Cheers everyone, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.